In HTML5, the number of different types of text elements for forms has grown. Only a few are supported in all the browsers, but it's worthwhile to take a look at those we can. Let's make a working copy of textelements.html, and I'm going to name this textelements-working.html, and I'm going to open it in my text editor here. And you'll see we have our style sheet and JavaScript we're using throughout this chapter. And here we have our forms element, and at the bottom, it's just the same as it is in the rest of the chapter. And on our form, we have a number of different elements. So let's go ahead and bring this up in the browser. And I'm going to start by bringing it up in Chrome so you can see what all of these are supposed to look like, because it actually implements all of these. And I'm also going to bring it up in Firefox so you can see what it looks like there, where a lot of these elements are not implemented. Most of these elements are implemented with the input tag, and the input tag in HTML is overloaded with a lot of different types of form elements. The default is text, and so if I actually take this out and save this and just say input name equals text1 and autofocus, and I reload this in my browser, you see I still have that text element. And so what's interesting about that fact is that for one of these elements, like for instance, the date element, which is supported in Chrome, but not in Firefox, is that it simply defaults to a regular text element, and I can type whatever I want in there. So the default is type equals text. And if you put in a type that is not supported, the standard says you're supposed to default to text. And that's exactly what every browser I've ever seen does. And so with all of these different types that are new, date, color, email, number, range, search, it just defaults to text. And so most of these are not supported in Firefox, and so they just come up as text elements. Each of these has a name, and you can also give it a value. If I say here value equals foo, that gives it a default value. And so when I bring it up, I'm going to stick with Chrome here for a while, but it works the same in Firefox. When I reload this, you see it has that foo value in it, and it still gets the autofocus because I have the autofocus attribute here. And that default value, if I press the return key on my keyboard, it'll go ahead and submit the form to the JavaScript. You see that that value is what comes up there in the text1 field. So the name is text1, and the value is whatever you type into it. If I type something else into it here, you see that that value comes up as what I typed in. So we'll go ahead and take that out. We'll look at the password field here. So we have type equals password and name equals password1. And so the difference with a password field is when you type into it, what you're typing is obscured. And when I press return, that value actually gets sent to whatever process it is. If it's JavaScript or if it's CGI, that value gets sent so that it can process that value and check the password or do whatever it's going to do with it. Input type equals date. Now I've done a few things here. Type equals date has a date picker. And so in Google Chrome, I can actually, there's the months. I can select a different month from the dropdown. It's got this whole date picker thing. Here's different years. And I select one, and there's February 11th, 2015. Notice that it's formatting it according to the locale in my system setting for my computer. So it'll do that. Actually, on my laptop, I've changed the setting for this so it shows year, month, day, because I'm a programmer and I like to be really specific. And this to me is really vague. If you're in Europe, it'll probably be month, day, year, as opposed to day, month, year, how we have here. But on Firefox, you'll notice that it just comes out as a regular text field because Firefox doesn't support that. So this gives me an opportunity to show you another feature. If I type something in here that is not a date and I submit it, you notice I get a little error that says, please match the requested format year, month, day. And that's because here in the code, I've put in this pattern. Pattern is a new attribute in HTML5 that allows you to use a regular expression to give it a pattern for what sort of input is expected. And then the validation API will actually check it against that pattern. And I used the title attribute so that I have a little tooltip that says this is the format that's expected there. So now if I type in an actual date, you'll notice that as soon as that is matching, that the little red outline goes away. If I put in too many, I get the red outline again. And when I enter that, I now get the valid. So it makes the validation easier is all that is. That's just an interface to the validation API. Next up is the color element. And so we have type equals color, name equals color1, and I gave it a value here for a starting color. And so when I bring this up in Google Chrome and I reload, you notice that that bluish color, that's the color that I specified here, 369 in hex. And if I change this, and I like this little reddish color there, and now when I submit the form, press the big red button, you notice that our color is AA1723. That's the color that I selected from the color picker. And of course, on whatever platform you're testing this on, your color picker will be different. That's the Mac color picker. So it's just interfacing into the operating system to get whatever color picker is available there. The email element, this actually works on both of these platforms. If I type something in here that is not an email address, I'll get a little error. It's just a validation thing. It says, please enter a comma-separated list of email addresses. And you'll notice that I have here the multiple attribute. If I take that out and I save and I reload over here and I type in an invalid email address, it'll say, please enter an email address. And if I try to enter actually a valid email address, because X is a valid domain, just isn't one that actually exists on the internet, but it could exist on my local network. I could set up a local DNS server and make that work. And so that's a valid email address. And that validates. If I put in here comma y at y, that's not a valid email address. But if I come back here and put back in the multiple attribute, now that's accepted. If I reload here and say x at x, y at y, it now validates. And you notice it even took out the space. And that's making it easier for my remote process to parse that. Next up is the number type. And this has a number, and I gave it min 1, max 5, value equals 1. And that gives me a little number chooser here on Google Chrome. And on Firefox, it's just a text field, and it doesn't even validate as a number. I can put in X's here, and it validates just fine. That's not implemented in Firefox. And this number chooser, you notice that it implements my minimum and maximum. It won't let me go below 1, and it won't let me go above 5. Likewise, the range, this is the range type, and it gives me this range chooser here. And you notice that it's in steps of 10. I have min 0, max 100, step 10, value equals 20. So it starts out at 20, which is right about there. And if I wanted to, I could put in some JavaScript over here that would show the value. And if I change this to all the way maximum, press the big red button, then I get 100. If I put it down a couple of notches, I'll get 80. If I change this step to 1 or take it out altogether, save that and reload, now you see it's continuous and it doesn't step like that. And if I press the big red button, I happened to hit a round number there, didn't I? But I can get any number that I want here. That range element is also not implemented in Firefox. The search element is really just like a text field, only it's formatted to look like a search box. So if I type something in here, it's formatted according to whatever the operating system has for a search box widget. It's even got that little X there for deleting what's there. And that's implemented in Chrome, and it's not implemented in Firefox at all. The URL element is just like a text box, only it validates as a URL. So if I just put in foo-bar-baz, it'll say, please enter a URL. So I have to put in a valid URL. I can say, this is my website, and it'll accept that. Or actually any valid URL, which of course, even x:x is a valid URL. And this also is implemented in Firefox. So if I say foo-bar-baz, this is easy to implement because it's just a validation routine. And again, x:x. And the HTML specification even gives an algorithm for validating this stuff. So it makes it really easy. And finally, text area. This is an element that's been around since the very beginning. And so of course it's implemented equally everywhere. Foo-bar-baz. And I can just paste a bunch of those in, and it goes on and on and on and on. And I can press the big red button, and I got this big bunch of text there. And that's what the text area is for. And that works just exactly the same in pretty much any browser. They're formatted a little differently here. You notice that in Chrome, it's got the same font as the rest of the elements. In Firefox, this is an old tradition. These used to always be formatted as monospace text. And so Firefox still does that for traditional reasons. You're going to want to style all of this stuff in real life. So those are the text elements. There are actually a lot more of them, and not all of them are implemented yet in any of the browsers I've tested. And some of them only work in a limited number of browsers. So I would consider most of these new ones to be experimental, with the exception of text, password, and text area. If you need your forms to work well in a variety of environments, I suggest you test it well or limit yourself to just the text and password and text area elements, and perhaps the email element for now.